Clearly, the only reasonable progression from the 50 Shades of Grey franchise is to the series that inspired the abomination in the first place. Because realistically, we should have started with this, but I didn't plan it out properly, so oh well. That's right, it's finally time to talk about the sparkly vampire saga beginning with the first film, Twilight, released in 2008 based on the novel of the same name that had come out 3 years prior and became an instant worldwide craze among teens and lonely housewives. Let's just get this out of the way now. Yes, I was one of the teenage fangirls who joyfully hopped on the Twilight sparkly vampire bandwagon back in its peak popularity. I didn't know any better, okay? Leave me alone. And before anyone gets on my case, vampires being in the story does not count as a spoiler. If this is new information to you, it's time to crawl out from under that rock you've been residing under. It's even printed on the back of the damn book. If you somehow aren't already well acquainted with the ins and outs of this story after more than a decade and would like to pass on the plot overview to avoid spoilers, you can skip to this timestamp in the video. So with that said, let's prepare our faces for an onslaught of cringing and get right into it. The movie begins in the nature place with a deer being pursued and caught by some unknown person with narration about dying in the place of a loved one. Then we meet one half of our main character, yes you heard that correctly, Bella Swan, who is moving away from Phoenix, talking some nonsense about how she'll miss the heat and whatnot. And as a current Phoenix resident, I'm gonna have to call bullshit on that one. No one enjoys the heat ever, not even people who grew up here. It's awful and horrible and all kinds of unbearable. Anyway, Bella's mom and new baseball player stepdad are going to be traveling the country for his career, so Bella is moving in with her dad, whom she rarely sees, in Forks, Washington. Their first interactions are extraordinarily awkward, mainly since they haven't even seen each other for a few years, and the weirdness continues on when they arrive home. The big homecoming is interrupted by the arrival of Billy Black and his son Jacob, who is childhood friends with Bella. They bring an old rust bucket of a Chevy that Charlie bought from Billy as a welcome home present. The next day, Bella has her first day at her new school in the middle of the semester in March. And immediately, boys start approaching her, knowing her name, and they get very weird and flirty, and it's just more awkwardness. No one in high school is ever this nice and welcoming to the new kid. So once again, we have this super plain, ordinary, and generally boring girl who is unexplainably special and unique and essentially becomes the center of everyone's universe. And I get it, they're using the average girl Mary Sue trope to make her so relatable, but ugh, I just hate it. It gets worse in gym class, where she's an absolute klutz, but even the guy she beans in the head with a volleyball suddenly gets all hot and bothered around her. Suddenly, she's befriended like half the kids in the school, and her new friend group consists of Eric, Mike, Jessica, Angela, and other names I can't be asked to remember, but still not as many as in the book. At lunch, after more cringy dialogue, she spots the Cullens for the first time, the adopted children of the local Dr. Carlisle, who all share similar features like eye color and super pale skin, and the girls talk about them as if they're gods. Including Rosalie and Emmett, who are a couple, Jasper and Alice, who are also a couple. No one really acknowledges just how weird it is that these adopted siblings are actually dating. It's just kind of brushed off, but this still feels a little icky. And finally, there's Edward, who Jessica is totally not obsessed with and definitely not bitter that he hasn't noticed her with her big mega crush. Just barely 10 minutes in and we have way more characters than I could ever be bothered to pay attention to. The next class period is biology with Edward, and as Bella walks in, she steps in front of a fan and Edward immediately recoils and covers his nose once her scent reaches him. So of course, the only seat available is next to him. She subtly sniffs herself to see if she stinks, and he stares at her very intensely the entire time and hurries to leave once class ends. Bella goes to the office to see Edward unsuccessfully trying to transfer out of the class. At a diner with Charlie, everyone has to awkwardly come up and say hi and ask Bella if she remembers them from her childhood. Slowly, Charlie and Bella start to sort of bond, but only sort of. She asks about the Cullens, who he says are newcomers, but they're very nice and people around Forks are too gossipy. Bella talks with her mom later and is very bothered by Edward's cold reception. I get it, it's a pun, but we haven't gotten to that part of the movie, but trust me, it's funny. Anyways, she plans to confront him at school, but he and the other Cullens don't show up for the next several days. Meanwhile, we see one of the men from the diner getting hunted by some creepy people. Not much else to say here, because we don't know what these folks are up to yet, but we will. Eventually. Then before school the next morning, Charlie says there was a report of a man being killed by some kind of animal. How mysterious. But we don't have time to worry about a gruesome murder because the boys are asking Bella to prom. We have priorities here, people. And even more important, Edward is back in biology class with yellow eyes instead of black, and he is much nicer to her this time. Bella asks why he was gone, and he tells her he was out of town for personal reasons, then makes conversation about the weather. Oh, be still my beating heart. Bella also explains that she moved to Forks despite hating the climate because her mom and stepdad set off without her and she didn't want to hold them back. Finally, she also questions the change in his eye color and he explains it away as being caused by the fluorescent lights, and he suddenly leaves. Okay, you fucking freak, wherever you're going, bring back a better excuse while you're at it. After school, Bella is at her truck with Edward still creepily watching her from the other side of the parking lot when a van skids and almost hits her. Edward suddenly appears in front of her and blocks the oncoming vehicle with his hand, making a huge dent in the side. Everyone freaks out and Bella is taken to the hospital even though she's completely fine, and she gets examined by Carlisle Cullen, Edward's adoptive father. Edward is at the hospital and Bella overhears a conversation where his siblings are apparently angry with him for saving her. They skitter off and she questions Edward how he got to her so quick, and he lies and insists he was actually standing next to her the whole time and she's just confused and no one will believe her. They aren't even together yet and this dude is already gaslighting her to all hell. What the fuck? But she thanks him and says she's not gonna tell anyone, so it's just whatever, I guess. Later that night, she supposedly dreams or hallucinates or something about Edward being in her room while she's sleeping. Put a pin in this for later. Their class goes on a field trip and we're still stuck on this stupid prom side plot, but Bella makes an excuse to her would-be suitors that she's going to Florida, where her mom and stepdad have finally settled, as a way to politely reject them. Edward asks her about Florida because he's a nosy eavesdropper, but Bella is snarky because he still won't give her answers about the car accident. This time, he changes his answer to he had an adrenaline rush that allowed him to stop the van and tells her she can Google it. Dude over here sounded like Alex Jones. This is a fact, look it up, I'm right, just look it up. He's very standoffish and says they shouldn't be friends. The next day, Bella's friends invite her to a gathering at La Push Beach on the reservation where Jacob Black lives. Edward approaches her again and says even though they shouldn't be friends, that doesn't mean he doesn't want to, but she would be smart to stay away from him. Holy mood swings, my guy. She says he's just trying to keep her away and they should hang out and invites him to the beach. But when she says it's La Push, he suddenly declines. At the aforementioned gathering, Jacob drops in for about 2 minutes to provide backstory with legends about his ancestors being descendants from wolves. Because of course we have to have an ethnic person with ancestral legends about supernatural beings. And the Cullens being descended from an enemy clan called the Cold Ones. And there was a treaty between the two groups, and then he promptly leaves until the end of the movie. Poor Jacob, his biggest role in this movie is an expositional tool. Another man is killed by the 3 weird people who refer to him as food, but who cares because Bella is upset over the absence of the Cullens on a sunny day. Jessica says they always go hiking or camping whenever the weather is nice, and the girls all go shopping for prom dresses. And even though Bella has no plans to attend the dance, she accompanies them to stop by a bookstore nearby. She breaks off from her friends to go buy a book, and as she's walking at night, she gets cornered by a bunch of rapey dudes until Edward swoops in and saves the day and they drive off in his car, with him being super pissed about the vile things the men were thinking. For some reason, Bella doesn't immediately demand answers, and they stop by a restaurant where Bella was supposed to meet her friends. Though they've already eaten, so they leave her and Edward alone to have dinner. But only Bella eats anything because he's on a special diet. She questions how he knew where she was, even about to get up and leave when he initially refuses to answer, but he says he followed her because he feels protective of her and wanted to keep her safe and heard what the creeps were thinking. Turns out, Edward can read everyone's mind except for hers, and he doesn't have the strength to stay away from her anymore, which is but I guess we'll pretend it's romantic. In the car, their hands brush and his skin is icy cold. See, there's that pun I made. I told ya. It was funny. But before she can question it, they stop by the police station where there's a big kerfuffle after another report of an animal attack, and Charlie gives her pepper spray to carry. The body is wheeled past Bella, and for some reason that makes her suddenly think back to all of Edward's weird traits, like not eating, the change in eye color, not going in sunlight, icy skin, and super speed. And of course, we must have the cliche internet search where she looks up information about undead immortal people who drink blood. Oh gosh, I wonder what could possibly be going on here. It's such a mystery. At school, she and Edward just walk off into the woods, just fuck right off from the parking lot, and no one notices or cares, I guess. And she tells him she's figured out that he is a vampire, but she's not afraid of him because she believes he won't hurt her. He takes her up the mountain to show what he looks like in the sunlight, and after some god-awful running effects, he shows her that his skin sparkles in the sun and showcases how fast and strong he is. Going on and on about how he's dangerous and designed to kill, and he's murdered people before, and he wants her blood more than any humans, even though his family only drinks animal blood. But Bella is like a freaking bull and runs straight at these red flags because she doesn't care, and she's only afraid of losing him, and would rather die than stay away from him because she wants in that sparkly boy's pants. So they lay down in the meadow and just stare at each other, and wait a minute, they're just not going back to school at all for the day? They're just gonna ditch to make flirty eyes at each other? When they do finally decide to go back to school the next day, they arrive as a couple and everyone stares at them. But Edward's siblings don't seem too keen on the idea of him having a human girlfriend. We get some pointless backstory about how Carlisle turned Edward into a vampire in 1918 when he was dying from the Spanish influenza, and then the secondary news that other vampires have been responsible for the recent killings. Why is no one more concerned about this? It's only briefly mentioned before Edward goes on explaining how his sister Alice can see the future, but her visions are subjective since the future can always change. So I suppose we're just not gonna fuss over the super dangerous vampires, especially once Edward invites Bella to meet his family. But she's not worried about being in a house full of vampires, more so that they won't approve of her. Seems like completely rational thinking. The couple arrives to find the Cullens cooking dinner, and Bella meets everyone, including Carlisle's wife Esme, but gets a less than pleasant greeting from Rosalie, who says this situation puts them all at risk since if something happens to Bella, then they could all be exposed. Edward and Bella pay no mind to the one semi-rational individual in this family and go to his room to chat about more silly vampire nonsense that's just boring, until he randomly soars out the window with her on his back and they climb a tree? Couple goals? Question mark? Then we get a weird montage with piano music that feels sort of reminiscent of a fragrance commercial, and all negative thoughts are forgotten until the police are hunting the three vampires thinking it's still an animal and find human footprints intentionally left to lead them off the trail. And I'm left questioning the motivation of these bad vampires because if the humans think it's an animal and therefore would be much less concerned, why intentionally leave behind footprints of a person to get them thinking there's some kind of crazed serial killer on the loose and making it a much more urgent matter? Does no one have any sense of logical thinking or deductive reasoning in this film? Charlie is the first to answer this question with a resounding no because his main concern is whether or not Bella is making friends. It's official. I hate this entire cast of characters. Bella calls her mom, who's still settling into Florida, and starts talking about Edward when he suddenly appears in her room, where he mentions he's been watching her sleep, so that wasn't a dream or hallucination from earlier. And they have a very intense and weird makeout session until he suddenly flings himself against a wall and he stays and watches her sleep, which he's already been doing since before they got together, and it's so weird. Bella tells her dad she has a date with Edward, and he acts all dad about it. Then they go play baseball with his family, which they can only do during a thunderstorm to mask the sounds of the bat cracking against the ball with their super strength. And this scene actually isn't horrible in its own weird way. It's somehow unironically good and entertaining. It has decent cinematography, but mainly it's just very enjoyably dumb and non-serious, and a nice break from this whole mountain of angst. But the game gets interrupted when the three bad vampires suddenly approach, having heard them playing. Wow, it's almost like ignoring glaring problems has later consequences. Who would have thought? The other vampires introduce themselves as Laurent, being third wheel, I guess, to the couple Victoria and James. And they and the Cullens act friendly towards each other until the wind blows and James gets a whiff of Bella and wants to eat her. Laurent tries to keep the peace and leaves with his group, but Edward read James's thoughts and knows he will be hunting Bella, taking Edward's protectiveness of her as a challenge, kinda like toxic masculinity personified. The Cullens make a plan to get Bella out of Forks and away from James until they're able to deal with him, so Bella and Edward go back to her house and put on a show for Charlie, pretending to fight and break up, and she starts packing some things and telling Charlie she's leaving. But he insists that she stay, even begs her, saying they can spend more time together if it'll get her to stay since he just got her back. So she has to deal a low blow, saying she doesn't want to be stuck there like her mom was. Oh, poor Charlie. Bella, you are such an asshole and I don't like you. She leaves her heartbroken dad to go back to the Cullens' place, where Laurent warns them about James and Victoria and their ruthless nature, and he sets out on his own. The Cullens decide to take Bella out of state for some reason, even though there's 6 of them against 2, so it should be stupidly easy to defeat them, but they split up, with Alice and Jasper planning to take Bella south to Phoenix, and Edward and the rest planning to try to lead James away. So Edward and Bella have to separate and have a sad goodbye, with Edward saying Bella is his life, even though she's only been in Forks for like a week, and they've had maybe 10 minutes of screen time together where he wasn't being a major dick. Their plan works for a while, but eventually James realizes he's been duped and changes course, which Alice sees in a vision with a room full of mirrors that Bella recognizes as a ballet studio she used to go to as a kid. Edward is rushing to Phoenix to get to her, but in the meantime, Bella gets a call from James saying he kidnapped her mom and she has to meet him at the aforementioned ballet studio alone. She ditches Alice and Jasper, which somehow Alice doesn't see in her visions, but we get the narration we heard from the beginning and she arrives at the studio. Bella realizes her mom isn't actually there and the voice she heard was from an old family videotape. James taunts her because I guess his parents never taught him not to play with his food, so she sprays him in the face with the pepper spray, which unsurprisingly does nothing. So he throws her against a wall and breaks her leg. Edward swoops in once again to save the day, and he and James fight, but in the scuffle, James manages to bite Bella on the arm. The rest of the Cullens finally arrive. I guess they were waiting in the wings or something to tear James apart and burn him. So Edward is tasked with sucking out the venom that's causing Bella immense pain. I'm not sure why Carlisle can't do it. He's a doctor and literally immune to the temptation of blood. Edward goes to suck the venom out, but he has a very difficult time stopping even once her blood is clean, and she passes out. This scene is extra stupid because Bella becomes a vampire in the last book and movie anyway, so if Edward had just let the venom spread, we could have skipped the entirety of the second and third book, probably a lot of the dumb wolf stuff in the fourth as well, but oh, we will get to that. So congratulations, Edward, we're gonna have to slog through way more of this nonsense than necessary because of your short-sightedness. Thanks. And can we just talk for a moment about James going to such extreme lengths and unnecessary absurdities like leading Bella to the dance studio, when we've seen him before just kill someone outright and get it over with? Oh, but that's right. We gotta pad the runtime so Edward has a reasonable amount of time to suddenly catch up and save his damsel in distress. Fucking yikes, bro. Bella wakes up in a hospital and her mom is there with Edward pretending to be asleep. The story given by the Cullens is that Bella fell down some stairs and I guess bounced up through a window? Like, how does anyone buy this crap? Mom of the Year leaves once her daughter is finally awake and Edward says James is dead and Victoria took off. He encourages Bella to go live with her mom to keep her safe, but she refuses and begs him to stay with her. To which he says, where else would he go? Just wait until the next movie, my guy. We suddenly cut back to Forks, the night of the prom, where both Bella and Edward get dressed up to attend. Because somehow Charlie isn't mad at either of them, and Bella just ignores how she has vehemently expressed her aversion to school dances. Once they arrive, Jacob shows up for his third and final minute of screen time. Yeah, you go, Jacob, you earn that paycheck. Because his dad wanted him to convince her to leave Edward, which is about as strange as it sounds, but Bella just brushes it off like it's no big deal. Her friend's dad is stomping on so many boundaries. Jessica is at prom with Mike, Angela is there with Eric, and everyone we don't give a shit about is having a fabulous time. But Edward and Bella ditch after literally a minute to slow dance outside alone, and the few people there just randomly decide to vacate the vicinity. Bella asks why he didn't just let her turn, especially because it's what she wants, so they can be together forever. But he doesn't want to give her any options or make any sort of choices for herself, so she can retain her humanity. And they do a stupid fake out where it looks like he might bite her, but no, he doesn't, because as dumb and corny as the series is, I don't think they'd have a public display of turning someone into a vampire. So they just kiss and dance, and it's all romantic and mushy. But then we see Victoria's watching them, and she lets her hair down all dramatically, like all good villains do, and that's it. That's the end. That's where we're gonna leave this movie until the next 4. Twilight, both film and novel, and heck, the entire series, is the antithesis of just because something is outrageously popular does not make it good. It doesn't even have as much of an ironic fan base like many well-known horrible films. People legitimately think this writing is like Shakespeare. I was part of that fanship a decade ago, so it's not like I've had these negative opinions from the start. I went back and revisited Twilight after growing and maturing into an actual semi-functional member of society and realized just how bad it really is. Where do I even begin? It's just pure angst and awkwardness, so it's understandable why so many young teenage girls, including myself, were so obsessed with this. The relationship with our main characters is just purely awful and based on stalking and severe codependency. There's a reason the "still a better love story than Twilight" meme exists. It's a very destructive and emotionally abusive relationship that really already had a lot of the groundwork laid down for 50 Shades of Grey, where the worst aspects of this franchise became the focal points. And just like 50 Shades of Grey, the lack of an inner monologue from the protagonist going from page to screen is a blessing, aside from a few lines of narration. Because trust me, you do not want to be inside Bella's head throughout this whole ordeal. Because book Bella is actually extremely shallow and only obsessed with Edward's looks. She barely mentions anything about his personality, but she absolutely makes sure to describe his oh-so-perfect appearance, voice, even his smell in excruciating detail. If I have to read about Edward's voice being described as velvet one more time, I'm going to vomit. I mean, Edward is attracted to Bella because her blood smells extra delicious to him. Okay, sure, but why is Bella attracted to him? She becomes infatuated with him immediately, and especially since, in the books, she's constantly rambling on about his godlike appearance and almost nothing else, that makes her affection seem very superficial. And I mean, yeah, it's clear that all vampires and not just Edward are absolutely gorgeous, but good looks does not constitute a solid foundation for true love. It's even specifically mentioned in the books that vampires are so godlike that humans are actually adverse to them because of how alien they seem. Although I will say, book Bella at least has some semblance of a personality. She's funny, she's sarcastic, she's witty. She holds her ground against Edward when they're arguing. Movie Bella just looks uncomfortable literally all the time. Ben Stein has more inflection and and emotion in his speech than she does. Heck, both the leads constantly look like they're in pain, especially when they're kissing. There's almost no chemistry between the two, despite them actually dating in real life at the time. And what baffles me is that Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson aren't bad at acting at all. They've both starred in plenty of other films and been excellent, but they're so terrible here. I guess another carryover to 50 Shades of Grey. In fact, the only character I not only tolerate but actually enjoy, now being older and viewing this with a slightly more mature mindset, is Bella's dad, Charlie, which made me hate Bella even more when she was unnecessarily being a dick to him. And the effects, oh dear God, it's so laughable. Just turning everything into a messy blur to indicate speed is the epitome of lazy editing, making all the CGI and action scenes so awkward and awful to look at. And there are still shots of the vampires clearly in sunlight in public, but there's no sparkle. They just try to put a heavy blue filter over the footage and think it'll work, and surprise, it doesn't. And everything, nearly every single shot, has that grayish blue overtone, and I hate it. Why is there so much goddamn blue? Even the pacing is rock bottom. Any sort of conflict or non-relationship plot doesn't start until 2/3 of the way through the movie. At least we get glimpses of the actual bad guys before our star-crossed lovers meet them, so we know it's going to be a future conflict. In the book, it's just 70% will they or won't they until the antagonist is suddenly dropped directly into the story. And it's annoying just how non-violent this vampire movie is. Vampires should equal gore. Let us see some rogue vampires kill people and have Edward hurt the creepy, almost rapists. Can't murder them because, oh, that makes him a monster and yada yada, but maybe a little more than just a glare, break a kneecap or two or something. I know sparkly vampires is like the big shtick, but they should have gone with more traditional vampires with no sparkling and instead making sunlight their weakness. This is typically a universal characteristic of vampires to balance out their supernatural powers. And without it, they're basically just deadly, super strong, unstoppable beings. Having no significant weakness or threats, the vampires in this universe totally would have taken over the world since they can just easily overpower all the humans. Looking back on it, I can see why this was such a big hit for teenagers because they're at a point in their lives where emotions are constantly riding high. Everything is a big deal. So these two strangers going from zero to if I don't have you, I'm going to die in mere minutes with a dash of forbidden love dramatics, I can kinda see the draw to it. And although the actual quality level of the film is far below the floor, it's still entertaining in an ironic way, and even all these years later, I'll still find myself rewatching through this series with an alcoholic beverage or 3 to have a hearty laugh at it. So because of this, I'm giving Twilight my personal rating of 4 out of 10. And you can bet your non-sparkly butt I'll be doing the rest of the Twilight films because apparently after getting through the entirety of 50 Shades of Grey, I just want to suffer more. It's 2020. Misery is just my life now. This is how it has to be. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and if you have any suggestions for movies I should discuss and review in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you have not already, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye!